I used to sit quietly at family gatherings, listening to my siblings brag about their six-figure salaries, luxury cars, and exotic vacations. Every year without fail, someone would turn to me with that same condescending smile. "So, Diane, still playing teacher?" They laughed at my worthless career. They calculated how much money I was losing by choosing a classroom over a courtroom. To them, I was the family disappointment. The woman who threw away a golden ticket to success in exchange for chalkboards and children's books. I stayed silent, not because they were right, but because I knew something they didn't. Fast forward 30 years. When their prestigious law firm crumbled under a massive lawsuit, and the bank account started bleeding dry, guess who they came crawling to for help? The same failure they mocked for decades, the same sister and daughter they thought had nothing to offer. But when I revealed my net worth, let's just say their jaws hit the floor. What would you do if the people who belittled you suddenly needed saving? Stay tuned to hear how I turned years of ridicule into a legacy they never saw coming. And don't forget to subscribe to Outlaw Alley for more real stories of revenge, redemption, and lessons learned the hard way. I was born into the Foster family, a name that carried weight in Atlanta's elite circles. My father was a powerhouse attorney, founding partner of one of the most respected law firms in the state. My mother, a socialite known for her charity galas and country club luncheons. In our household, success wasn't just expected, it was demanded, and success by their definition came with Ivy League degrees, corner offices, and hefty paychecks. My older brother Charles followed the script perfectly. Harvard law partner by 35, driving a brand new Mercedes before I even graduated college. My sister Evelyn wasn't far behind, an executive at a top financial firm living in a penthouse downtown. Then there was me, Diane Foster, the youngest, the creative one, as they used to say with thinly veiled disdain. While they thrived in boardrooms and courtrooms, I found my passion in a place they considered beneath them, an elementary school classroom in one of Atlanta's underserved neighborhoods. I still remember the day I told my father I wouldn't be joining his law firm. His face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Teaching," he scoffed. "You're throwing away your education, you're throwing away your future." To him and everyone else in my family, I wasn't making a noble choice. I was making a mistake. At first, I tried to justify it, explaining how I wanted to make a difference, how I believed every child deserved a chance regardless of their zip code. But my words fell on deaf ears. They didn't care about passion or purpose. They cared about prestige and profit. From that moment on, I became the black sheep. Family dinners turned into subtle interrogations, masked as small talk. "How's your little job going? Must be tough living on a teacher's salary." "Have you thought about going back to school for something more practical?" It wasn't just the words, it was the looks, the pity, the smirks when I mentioned working late to help a struggling student. They loved to remind me of what I could have been. A top lawyer, a high-powered executive instead of what I chose to be. But what they never understood was that every morning when I stepped into my classroom, I felt rich in ways they couldn't measure. Seeing a child's eyes light up when they finally grasped a concept, hearing a shy student read aloud for the first time, those were the moments that filled my soul. Of course, those moments didn't pay for fancy cars or designer clothes. I lived modestly. A small house, a used car, and a wardrobe that wouldn't turn heads at any of my mother's galas. And that was fine by me, because I wasn't chasing their version of success. Still, no matter how content I was, the sting of their mockery never fully faded. Year after year, I endured their jokes, their backhanded compliments, their thinly veiled judgment. It became a tradition, Charles and Evelyn boasting about bonuses and promotions, while I sat quietly sipping my wine, waiting for the inevitable jab about my charity work. But while they were busy measuring success in dollars and titles, I was quietly building something far more valuable, even if I didn't realize it yet. Because sometimes the seeds you plant in silence grow into forests no one sees coming. It started with a simple idea. One afternoon, I watched another student, 8-year-old Marcus, struggle through a reading assignment. His frustration was palpable, but I knew it wasn't because he wasn't smart. He just needed a different approach. That night, instead of unwinding like most teachers after a long day, I sat at my kitchen table sketching out a new way to help kids like Marcus A system that broke reading down into small, achievable steps. With games, stories, and rewards to keep them engaged, I called it ReadRight. At first, it was nothing more than laminated charts, colorful flashcards, and hand-drawn worksheets. I shared it with a few colleagues who saw immediate improvement in their students. Word spread around the school, then to other schools, but to me it was still just a passion project, something I did because I loved seeing kids succeed. I wasn't thinking about patents or profits. Then one day I received an unexpected email. It was from Daniel Kim, a name I hadn't heard in over a decade. A former student of mine. In his message he wrote, "Ms. Foster, I never forgot how you helped me learn to read when no one else could. I owe my success to you." Daniel wasn't the shy, struggling boy I remembered. He was now a tech entrepreneur running a startup focused on educational tools. He'd heard about ReadRight through a teacher friend and immediately saw its potential. We met for coffee and he pitched an idea I never considered, turning my humble program into a digital platform, an app that could reach thousands, maybe millions of students beyond my classroom walls. I was hesitant. I wasn't a businesswoman. I was a teacher. But Daniel believed in me the same way I had believed in him all those years ago. He offered to handle the technical side and initial funding. If I would refine the program and guide its educational vision, I agreed. Not for the money, but because I saw a chance to help more kids like Marcus and Daniel. For the next few years, my life became a balancing act. By day, I taught full-time. By night and weekends, I worked with Daniel's team, testing features, writing content, fine-tuning every detail. The first version of ReadRight launched quietly. No billboards, no flashy marketing campaigns, just word of mouth among teachers who were desperate for tools that actually worked. Slowly but surely, downloads increased. Schools began subscribing. We reinvested every dollar back into development, expanding features, improving user experience. All the while, I kept my success hidden. At family gatherings, nothing changed. Charles would still brag about his latest courtroom victory. Evelyn would flash photos of her European vacations. And like clockwork, someone would ask, "Still teaching those kids, Diane?" I'd smile politely and nod. No one cared to ask about my side projects. Why would they? In their eyes, I was still the underachiever. What they didn't know was that ReadRight was quietly becoming a staple in classrooms across the country. The modest profits began to grow enough for me to live comfortably, but I never changed my lifestyle. No fancy cars, no designer clothes, just more resources for my students and a growing bank account I never spoke of. 15 years passed like that, and then out of nowhere, everything changed. A major educational technology company reached out with an offer. They wanted to acquire ReadRight, the number they put on the table. $9 million. I was stunned. Even Daniel was speechless. After careful negotiations and legal reviews, the deal was finalized. Daniel took his share and moved on to his next venture. I walked away with a fortune quietly. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, certainly not my family. I still showed up to my classroom every morning. Still drove my old sedan, still wore the same clothes they loved to mock, because for me nothing had really changed, except for one thing. I now held a card in my back pocket, one I never thought I'd need to play. But life has a funny way of humbling those who think they're untouchable, and soon my family would learn that lesson the hard way. It was a Sunday afternoon when I got the call. Charles, my brother, the one who never missed an opportunity to remind me of my wasted potential, "Diane, we need to talk." His voice didn't carry the usual arrogance. Instead, there was something I'd never heard before. Desperation. I agreed to meet him and Evelyn at our father's house the next day. When I walked into that grand estate, the same one where I'd endured years of smug glances and patronizing comments, the atmosphere was different. Gone were the confident smirks and dismissive tones. In their place were furrowed brows, tense shoulders, and eyes clouded with worry. Our father sat silently in his leather chair, looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen him. It didn't take long for the truth to come out. The law firm, the pride of the Foster family, was collapsing. A high-profile malpractice lawsuit had exposed years of negligence and mismanagement. Clients were fleeing, creditors were circling like vultures. And the worst part, they had mortgaged nearly every asset to cover mounting legal fees, the house, the cars, even the retirement funds, all on the line. For the first time in their lives, my family was staring down the barrel of financial ruin. Charles cleared his throat, struggling to meet my gaze. We were hoping you could help Diane." I almost laughed. "Help? What kind of help did they think I could offer?" "A few words of encouragement. Maybe some moral support from their charity case sister." Evelyn chimed in, her voice shaky but still laced with that familiar condescension. "We know you don't have much, but anything would ease the burden." I sat back, folding my hands in my lap, letting the silence hang in the air. They truly believed I was still the woman they'd mocked for decades, the poor schoolteacher with nothing to her name but good intentions. I looked at my father, the man who once told me I was throwing my life away. His eyes, once sharp and judgmental, now avoided mine entirely, pride stripped away by circumstance. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I could have walked away, let them face the consequences of their arrogance and narrow-mindedness. But that's not who I am. "I can help," I said calmly. Their heads snapped up in surprise. Charles blinked. "I mean, emotional support is great, but we're talking about real money here, Diane." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Inside copies of my financial statements. I slid it across the table without a word. Evelyn hesitated before opening it. As her eyes scanned the pages, her jaw slowly dropped. Charles leaned over his face, draining of color with every line he read. My father finally looked at me. Really looked at me. You have this kind of money," he whispered, disbelief etched into every wrinkle on his face. I nodded. For years now. The room fell silent, the weight of reality sinking in. All those years they spent mocking me. All those dinners where they laughed at my worthless career. And here I was, the only person in the family who could save them, but I wasn't about to hand over a check without making a point. "I'll help cover the debts," I said, my voice steady. "But there's a condition?" They exchanged nervous glances. "What kind of condition?" Charles asked cautiously. I leaned forward, locking eyes with each of them. "We establish a foundation. The Foster Educational Innovation Fund. You'll fund it with me, and I'll serve as director. Its sole purpose will be to support teachers creating programs like the one you all dismissed for years." Evelyn's mouth opened in protest, but I raised a hand. "No negotiations. You wanted my help. This is the price." For the first time, they realized this wasn't just charity. This was accountability. My father exhaled slowly, the fight draining from him. "Fine," he murmured. "You have a deal." In that moment, I knew there was no going back. The balance of power in our family had shifted forever, and they would finally have to respect the very thing they spent a lifetime ridiculing. I left that meeting with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. For once, I wasn't the one walking away feeling small. This time, they were the ones forced to swallow their pride. But I knew words weren't enough. I needed to make sure they followed through, so I got to work. The very next day, I contacted my attorney, someone I trusted, someone far outside my family's legal circles. We drafted the paperwork for the Foster Educational Innovation Fund. It wasn't going to be just a name on a plaque. This foundation would be real, impactful, and permanent. I structured it carefully, a multi-million-dollar endowment partially funded by me but requiring ongoing contributions from family assets. If they wanted my help paying off their debts, they had to sign binding agreements ensuring annual funding for the foundation. When I presented the legal documents to Charles and Evelyn, their faces twisted in discomfort. They had assumed this would be a symbolic gesture, something to appease me before returning to business as usual. But I wasn't giving them that option. Every clause was airtight, every loophole closed. "This isn't just about saving you today," I told them. "It's about ensuring that our family stands for something more than wealth and status." Reluctantly, they signed, pride still lingering in their hesitant hands, but desperation pushed them forward. Once the foundation was official, I transferred enough funds to stabilize their situation, paid off the immediate debts, kept the creditors at bay, and gave the law firm a fighting chance to restructure. But I didn't stop there. I organized a press release announcing the launch of the Foster Educational Innovation Fund. If they were going to benefit from my success, the world was going to know exactly why this foundation existed. At the press conference, I stood at the podium, not as the failed teacher they once saw me as, but as the director of a multi-million-dollar initiative dedicated to empowering educators. Reporters asked questions about my journey, about ReadRight, about why I chose this path. I answered with grace, but I didn't shy away from the truth. For years, I was told my career had no value, that teaching was a dead end, I said, glancing briefly at my family seated in the front row. But today, I stand here to prove that investing in education is never worthless. It's the foundation of real progress. The media ate it up. Articles circulated praising the Foster family's commitment to education reform. Of course, I knew the truth. This wasn't their vision, it was mine. Behind closed doors, Charles and Evelyn simmered with quiet resentment, but they knew better than to challenge me now. My father, however, surprised me. A week after the press conference, he invited me to his study, just the two of us. For a moment, I expected another lecture, some last-ditch effort to regain control, but instead he looked at me with something I never thought I'd see in his eyes. Respect. I was wrong about you, Diane. He admitted, his voice heavy with sincerity. All these years I measured success by the wrong standards. You've built something far greater than I ever did. It wasn't an apology for everything, but it was enough. From that point on, I took full charge of the foundation. I began reaching out to schools, offering grants to teachers with innovative ideas, just like I once had. We funded programs in underfunded districts, provided resources for classrooms that had been overlooked for decades. Slowly, the Foster name began to shift in meaning, no longer just associated with high-powered lawyers and wealth, but with education, innovation, and giving back. And my family, they had no choice but to play along. Publicly, they praised the foundation. Privately, they kept their distance. Perhaps embarrassed, perhaps still grappling with the fact that the sister they dismissed had become the pillar holding them up. But I didn't need their approval anymore. I had something far more valuable, the knowledge that I had turned years of ridicule into something lasting, something meaningful, and in the end I didn't just save my family's fortune, I redefined what it meant to carry the Foster legacy. The real turning point didn't come with contracts or press releases. It came months later at an annual gala my mother used to host, now rebranded as a charity event for the Foster Educational Innovation Fund. For years, these gatherings were showcases of status rooms filled with judges, CEOs, and politicians, the kind of people who once looked through me as if I didn't belong. But this year, everything was different. I wasn't just attending, I was the guest of honor. As I walked into the grand ballroom, I noticed how the whispers followed me, but not the way they used to. This wasn't pity or mockery. It was curiosity, admiration even. People approached me, eager to shake my hand, praising the foundation's impact, asking for insights into how we were transforming education across the state. Charles and Evelyn stood off to the side, nursing their drinks, watching as the spotlight shifted entirely away from them. For the first time in their lives, they were the ones being overlooked. The highlight of the evening came when my father took the stage. He looked out over a sea of faces that once revered him as the epitome of success. But tonight, his voice carried a different weight. I spent my life believing that wealth and prestige defined a person's worth. He began, his voice steady but somber. I was wrong. You could hear a pin drop. Even Charles and Evelyn froze. My daughter, Diane, chose a path I didn't understand, one I dismissed for far too long. He turned toward me, eyes glistening under the stage lights. She showed me that true legacy isn't built in courtrooms or measured by bank accounts. It's built in classrooms, in communities, and in the lives we touch. A wave of applause erupted, but I could barely process it. For a moment, I just sat there stunned. This was the same man who once told me I'd end up with nothing, the same man who made me feel invisible at every family milestone. And now here he was, publicly acknowledging not just my success, but the value of the very things he spent a lifetime dismissing. When I finally joined him on stage, he extended his hand, but instead of shaking it, I embraced him, not out of forgiveness, but because I knew how hard it must have been for him to say those words. After the event, guests continued to approach me, not Charles, not Evelyn, me. They wanted to know more about the foundation, how they could contribute, how they could be part of something meaningful. It was poetic. The same circles that once defined my family by their legal empire now celebrated us for our commitment to education. Charles tried to reclaim some dignity, dropping mentions of his role in supporting the foundation, but everyone knew this was Diane Foster's legacy. Evelyn, ever the strategist, softened her attitude toward me. She suggested we collaborate on future initiatives, but I saw through it. This wasn't about family bonding. It was survival in a world where I held the influence now. In the weeks that followed, donations poured in. We expanded our reach beyond Georgia funding programs nationwide. Teachers wrote letters of gratitude. Students shared stories of how our grants changed their futures. And as for my family's law firm, it stabilized, but it never returned to its former glory. The scandal had tarnished their reputation beyond repair. Ironically, the Foster name became more respected for what I built than for the empire they had spent decades cultivating. One afternoon, as I was reviewing grant applications in my office, I received a letter handwritten from my father. It was simple. No flowery language, no grand gestures. Diane, you taught me more in these past months than I learned in 60 years of practicing law. I'm proud to be known as your father. Richard Foster. I placed the letter in my desk drawer right next to a framed photo of my first classroom. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. There were no angry confrontations or slammed doors. But standing tall in a room full of people who once doubted me, watching my family rely on the strength they never thought I had, that was justice enough. Because in the end, I didn't just prove them wrong, I redefined what success looked like on my terms. Looking back now, I realize the greatest victory wasn't the money, it wasn't the foundation, the recognition, or even hearing my father admit he was wrong. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing I stayed true to myself, even when the people closest to me made me feel small for doing so. For decades, I let their voices echo in my head, telling me I'd wasted my potential, that I'd chosen a path beneath me. But what they never understood was that success isn't something you measure in dollars, titles, or the size of your house. It's measured in impact, in the lives you touch and the legacy you leave behind. I still wake up every morning with the same sense of purpose I had when I first stepped into a classroom. The difference now, I no longer question my worth, and neither does anyone else. My family learned that lesson the hard way, that the person you underestimate today might be the one holding the lifeline tomorrow. If I could tell my younger self anything, it would be this: never let anyone define your value by their limited vision of success, because the world needs more people who choose passion over prestige, purpose over profit, and sometimes the best revenge is simply proving that you were right to believe in yourself all along. What would you have done if your family spent years mocking your dreams, only to come begging for help when their world fell apart? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories of resilience, redemption, and the kind of success money can't buy. Here on Outlaw Alley.